straight from Delaware, it's Yoga Stories Project. This is a podcast about inspiring you to bring yoga and mindfulness into your life. I'm Hunter Clarke-FIELDS, mindfulness mama mentor. I coach overstressed moms on how to cultivate self-awareness in their daily lives and to take family and life to a new level of awakening. I've been practicing yoga and mindfulness for over 20 years and have taught thousands of women worldwide. So thank you for being here. I'm so happy you're here. It's been a while since I've talked to you on the podcast, so I appreciate your ears coming back. And it's the cusp of 2017, and it's crazy. Like, the world is crazy, but I'm feeling really optimistic in a weird way, and I'm not sure why. But anyway, this is a great episode for feeding your good wolf. I'll just put a shout out for another podcast I like. It's The One You Feed, and it's about the story of the two wolves, right? And this grandfather tells this grandson that there are two wolves inside each of us that are battling all the time. And one wolf is the wolf of fear, despair, hatred, anger, greed. And the other is the wolf that is, love, humility, kindness, compassion, all of those wonderful things. And so the grandson says, well, which wolf wins? And the grandfather says, the one that you feed. And I really believe that, the nutriment that you put into your body and your mind is really, really important. Oh, you're hearing my kitties here playing. This is really a podcast about feeding a good wolf, right? About bringing in media and bringing in voices and stories that really inspire you, because the news is so negative, all the worst things happening in the world. It's important to be informed, but we also need to bring in stories that lift us up and that inspire us to shine our own lights, right? Like I want you to feel so good that you are shining your light beautifully in the world. That's really, really important to me. Today's guest is Chelsea Jackson, and she's pretty amazing. She's an incredible yogi. She's a yogi educator, and I think you're going to find a lot to be inspired by about her and the work she does teaching teen girls at Spelman College. It's so, so cool. We talk about race, yoga, privilege, all these really cool things. We talk about teaching celebrities. Super cool. You're going to love it. This episode is sponsored by Choose to Be Nice, and once again, I'm wearing my Choose to Be Nice sweatshirt. And it's so funny because I don't actually plan to wear it when I record this intro. I just it's my favorite sweatshirt, so I'm wearing it, and I'm so cozy. So anyway, you can go over to choosetobenice.com. You can take their pledge to help end school bullying, and you can get 20% off all their apparel with the coupon code HUNTER20. So go ahead and do that. And my other sponsor is me. And it's the beginning of the year, so it's an exciting time for people to make a lot of change. And I'm enrolling my Year of Transformation coaching program and other coaching programs. And you can find out more about that under Work With Me at hunteryoga.com. And right now is a great time to maybe still for a week or so, grab those 2016 prices and make your new start for the next year and get the support you need to actually make it a reality in your life. It's really a profound change to do this work. And let me see, I can't think of anything else. Oh yeah, no new iTunes reviews. Oh, so sad. It's a great way. Please, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, today, just say, okay, I'm just going to give Hunter that iTunes review that she's been begging me for all this time. So go ahead and do that. And another great way, of course, is to share the podcast. So that's all. Thanks so much. On to this episode. Hi, and welcome to Yoga Stories Project. I'm Hunter, and I'm excited today to talk to Chelsea Jackson. And I was looking at how I should introduce Chelsea, and I was looking at her bio and stuff, but I love, Chelsea, I love your Twitter bio, and I'm just going to read this because this is funny the way you put it. Chelsea Jackson Roberts, PhD, ERYT, ethnographer, teacher, Spelman grad, lover, fighter, descendant of queens, kings, and hip hop. I love my 20 pearls. That's
Yes.
awesome.
Thank you.
What are the 20 pearls?
So the 20 pearls actually represent the 20 founders of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. It's the first
Oh.
sorority founded by African American women at Howard University. So I am a member of that sorority. So I always love to represent a community that has supported me since I was an undergrad and still very active with them to this day. So that's who the 20 pearls are.
That's cool. It's such an inside message. It's like,
Right, right,
what's going
right,
on with
right.
that? Well, cool. So I'm really excited to have you on here. You've done a lot of work with, I want to talk about what you've done with your art camp for teen girls
hmm
and the Yoga Body Image Coalition. I've had some other guests from the Yoga and Body Image Coalition on. And, but at first I'd love to start out with just, how did you discover yoga? Where were you in your life that yoga was speaking to you?
Sure. So I always like to share kind of this twofold path to my journey to yoga. It's funny, I recently just shared this on social media through Instagram with a hashtag my journey to the mat. And I initially began my practice from a completely physical understanding of yoga. I had just graduated from Spelman College. I didn't handle transitions as fluidly as I wished I could. And one of my major things that I went to was food, and I was a very emotional eater. I had done that so much that I really had gotten out of control of my health. And so I got into a point where it was difficult for me to walk upstairs and to walk around the neighborhood. And I became very discouraged when I tried to go, like to the local gym and work out. I wasn't very much at a place where I embraced the body I was particularly in at that time. And so it was difficult for me to do any type of activity really where I could move my body. And so I started to get curious about this thing called yoga. Like I didn't have any yoga studios in my hometown of Dayton, Ohio. The ways in which I saw yoga portrayed, it looked like you just had to be super flexible and already in shape
Mm-hmm.
and or lack of a better term already in shape but physically able and capable to do the postures that were being conveyed through yoga media and publications. And so I decided that I was going to give it a try. I went to my first hot yoga class. I fainted. I always love to tell
Oh
that
no.
story because I could not believe it happened. Like I was mortified by the time I woke up and I was just like, what in the world just happened? And so I kept going. Even though that was a moment that was a little scary, a little embarrassing, but then I actually used that as fuel. As my teacher always says, use it as fuel to move forward and to really become more and more curious, not of just this practice, but of myself and my ability to move past some things that were blocking my joy. And so I continued with this practice. Again, it was purely physical. And then around the time that I graduated, a couple of years after, my best friend and college roommate was actually murdered. And it really brought my life to a screeching halt. Like I had never experienced trauma in this way. I had never lost anybody my age, let alone someone who was a best friend of mine. And so I found myself not knowing or not having the tools to be able to cope with such a large trauma in my life. And so I started to look at my yoga practice a little differently beyond that physical because I knew that when I would go to the practice, there was something that was happening, even though I couldn't yet name it. It was just like I knew that there was some type of transformation happening, even if I didn't identify it as such. And so I found a local ashram, Kashi, Atlanta, where I found both of my teachers. And I started studying meditation and looking at yoga beyond the asana and really learning about the philosophy, the history, the sutras, like all of these different tools that came before this physical practice. And so I always like to share that kind of twofold path to this yoga practice, that it was one, physical, of me trying to kind of take ownership of my body again, and then also really using it as a way to cope with the emotional trauma I experienced from loss. And so ever since then, I look at it, I'm reflecting on it, and I'm like, I'm going into next year with this being my 15th year going into my yoga practice. So that is how I began.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I'm so sorry for the loss of your friend. Oh my gosh, I can't.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a lot to deal with. I mean, for anyone to, that's very, very, very big.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I imagine that would, push you into this deeper, needing to find some kind of grounding and some kind of understanding within for that, and to process all of that.
So Hunter, you're kind of breaking up here.
All right.
It's okay.
Hold on.
Okay.
I'm just gonna make a mark there for my sound editor to find the spot.
Okay.
I'm just, it's, that's intense to hear. I imagine that stops a lot of people when you tell that story, like about your friend.
Oh, absolutely. Because it comes kind of out of nowhere. Yeah. And I don't really know how to brace anyone for what I'm about to say next, but it is definitely a part of the story.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. When you were, not to make that smaller in any way, because there's no way you can, but when you were in, when you were talking about how you fainted in your hot yoga class, I left my first hot yoga class and went and took my mat and put it outside the glass door and practiced along outside in the cool.
Good for you.
I wouldn't
wish I would have known to do that.
Guys, I looked up and I was like, I get heat stroke sometime. Can you turn on these fans? And he was like, no. And I was like, oh man, I got it. Right. I'm curious about going back to that, just sort of that jump from, I'm curious about how that jump from fainting in this first class, how did you ever get yourself back to the next class and decide that was like a good thing for you?
Right. So, I just figured that this was because I had no knowledge of what yoga was. I just thought that this is what it was. And this was also something that is a part of the journey that I started to pull back on. I shared that in high school, I've shared before that in high school, I was definitely an overachiever. I was in band, I was in the marching band, and then halftime, I would switch out of my cheerleading uniform to do the halftime show with the band. So I was used to enduring a lot of physical, overwhelming things. And I say that because it's a part of the journey. However, through my yoga practice, I learned how to then take care of myself. So if it was me, who I am now, 15 years into my practice, going into that class, I probably wouldn't have returned because I'm just this is not sustainable. I'm enduring pain. But at the time, I thought that this was what yoga was. And so it wasn't really until I actually explored other practices and different teachers and not hot yoga that I really understood the fullness of yoga.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I get it.
So
I would
I would attribute that to my overachieving personality, which I have worked on years to kind of move through.
Well, it's interesting because your yoga that overachieving personality brought you to yoga, but then yoga helped you kind of smooth down the intensity of that overachieving personality.
Exactly. And that's what I teach in my classes. And sometimes that is what, sometimes I'm not for everyone because I am going to come from a place of you do what feels great in your body. If you feel like you need to be in child's pose for the rest of the class, by all means, do what is best for you, you know? And so that's how I know that I've evolved in my practice from that first day of enduring, going back to a hot yoga class.
So when your friend was murdered,
Mm-hmm.
you went to this ashram and you started with meditation. What kind of meditation did you start with then at
So
that time?
sure. So I ended up doing a 200-hour teacher's training there, and this particular space is called Kashi Atlanta. The teacher's training is very foundational in classical yoga. So the meditations that we receive are from a lineage of teachers, and it was just different meditations handed down over time, all the way from India. So it was definitely a classical experience, and I'm talking like the learning the yamas and the niyamas and learning from the Upanishads and all of these sacred texts that even came before the physical practice. And so a lot of the meditations that we received are really grounded firmly in classical yoga.
Were the meditations were they guided meditation? Because I'm wondering, as a young person,
Hmm.
so intensely broken up by this intense trauma, that it
Right.
might be really hard to sit in silence.
Right,
Like, and
absolutely.
yeah,
And that was what was so great about finding my teachers or my teachers finding me or however we look at it was that they approached it in a way that was very user friendly and was not scary to me because I think that the term meditation can scare a lot of people away
yeah.
because you do have this vision that I have to sit for 60 minutes in silence in full lotus and just really zone out or tune in or however you see it. But it was the way in which my teacher really taught the entire class, both individually and collectively, that it was accessible. So it may have just been 30 seconds of a guided meditation, or it may have been just teaching us a breathing exercise that helped us to calm our heart rate. So it was definitely over time that I got to a space where I could go to a Wednesday night meditation and sit for 2 hours in meditation. However, it did not come on the first day by any means.
Yeah, yeah, it takes a long time. Did you have any did you have any religious upbringing that you had that this classical yoga training may have brought up some issues around?
Sure. I think in particular, in Christian communities,
Hmm.
yoga in general is a very scary term for some people. And I was raised Christian. I'm from Dayton, Ohio. Went to church, still go back. I actually even taught a yoga class at a summer camp housed at my church. And so I come from a very liberal Episcopal community. So they were very open to having yoga there. And so I never really, my personal experience was never one that was just like, oh, what are you doing over there with that yoga? But I will say that I have encountered students who will come to me who have a different religious background, but I always emphasize that, and where I actually did my teacher's training always emphasizes that this yoga practice is for you and it's what you make it. And they definitely stress the fact that it's an inner faith, whether you believe in God in the form or the formless, or if God is love to you, or if God looks like Jesus or Buddha or Allah, whatever that may be, this space is for you to make it for you and to connect with whomever or whether that's inside of you. That is what drew me to the space as well, because I didn't want to go into any space, regardless of what the teaching was, to where it was kind of this fundamentalist, like you have to see it this way. That was what drew me to the practice in general, that it was open and invited so many different people from different backgrounds.
So it sounds like this particular studio there was a lot of room for interpretations, and there was room for different kinds of practices.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so needed, I think, today. It's like
Yes.
I think has been a boom in popularity in some rigid practices that
Uh-huh.
that are really frustrating. And I feel like yoga is has to be so individual. I mean, down to like there's no yoga posture, right? Without the particular, the individual shape of the person who's making the posture.
Absolutely.
So like, why do we have to be so rigid around these things? I think
Right.
there's a lot of rigidity to
Right.
kind of move around, in the community in general.
Right.
Yeah. Um, well, cool. So you kind of went and like you made a career of doing yoga, but you're also an ethnographer. Tell me
Yes.
about that.
So, ethnography is simply the study of culture. And so, my particular gaze in that culture is how literacy plays out in culture. So the ways in which cultures use different literacies or multiple literacies. And so when I decided to start my PhD program at Emory University, I actually have a concentration in language, literacy, and culture. And I wanted to focus specifically on yoga. And I wanted to know what it looks like for yoga to be used as a tool for communication and for understanding. And so that's where I approached this case study that later evolved into the camp that we run through our 501c3, which is Yoga Literature and Art Camp for teen girls. And so that is how all of that was created. I'm a former school teacher, and so I have had experience teaching children how to read using different ways to get the lessons across. And when I started my yoga teacher training program, I was a school teacher. And so some of the things that I was learning in the yoga classes that I was taking, I started to just slowly introduce into the class. And if that even just meant, just having a moment to breathe or a moment to stretch or to reflect or, to also notice how the children began to work amongst each other with more compassion and understanding. And that was the biggest inspiration for how I approached the case study. And so now here we are going into our fourth year of Yoga Literature and Art Camp. And the nonprofit Red Clay Yoga actually came after the actual program because we were looking at a way, my husband and I were looking at a way that we could make this space more sustainable. And so now we have grown into offering workshops and classes for people, for pre-service teachers, for teachers currently in the classroom, for people who work within marginalized populations who want to use yoga as a tool for learning. And so that's how all of that kind of integrated. And the ethnography piece comes from that is the method that I use to do the research.
Oh, okay. So the your red clay workshops, that you wanted to make this more sustainable. So now I'm curious about that because
Uh-huh.
I'm doing some work with some groups locally to where I am in Delaware to bring mindfulness into schools and different things like that. So
Uh-huh.
what like do you have with your program, do you have someone who's sort of full-time grant writing and doing that kind of work, or have
We are
you
currently looking for someone in that area. I have certainly dabbled in grant writing just because of the nature of getting a fellowship. However, we are in the process of seeking out people for our team to make it more robust. We're looking at across, different disciplines. So not just all yoga practitioners. We want to include psychotherapists and medical doctors and people who have, studied yoga, but not limited to. So that is definitely on our list of folks to bring in, especially to, create a sustainable program that will be here for decades.
Yeah. Well, there you go, listener. If this is, I don't know
Yes,
if this is going out.
you.
It might not be going out, but you can contact Chelsea and let her know if you're interested.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we live on the web right now. We are redclayyoga.org. And there you can learn about all of the offerings that we have as well.
So I'm curious about this idea. You said, like, what does it look like for yoga to be used in communication?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of this question that you were looking at. And so I want to hear more about this question. Like, what does it use for yoga to be used in communication? Because I think many people, we think of yoga as I don't know, maybe a non-communicative process, right? Because the teacher is communicating to the students, but the students are not communicating to each other. So what do you mean by that? Tell me more about that.
Sure. So when we look at yoga and we look at it from the most lay perspective of this embodied practice, this practice where we're using our bodies, we're breathing, we're stretching. And so if we think about these bodies that we have carried with us throughout our entire lives, our bodies are constantly experiencing trauma and joy and just life experiences in general. And so with that, our body is holding all of these stories within it. And one of the biggest challenges I had as a school teacher was around this practice of writing. And so when it came time for students to have to write or to do creative writing or just to start from a writing prompt, it was really difficult for them to begin. I experienced that with writer's block during my dissertation, of just not being able to articulate what my body was holding, right? Because I could actually feel that maybe there was something wrong or there was something going really well, but could not necessarily articulate that. So that is why yoga literature and art camp was so key in communities who are often silenced. So this particular year that we started the program, one of our teachers, who's actually my co-director, Octavia Rahim, she was a former middle school literacy teacher or literature English teacher. And it was really great for her to have one of the students actually in her middle school class, but then to see her compared into this setting. And she was just saying that the difference of how this particular student contributed and wrote was outstanding. Like, it was just like night and day to see how she felt very silenced in the classroom within this institution of school. But when she was outside of the school setting in yoga literature and art camp, her writing was amazing. Like, she articulated so much. And so I had this hunch that if we were able to really be in our bodies, really connect with the things that our bodies have experienced, and maybe if we were given the tools through our yoga practice, through breathing, or that feeling that we encounter right before we're about to write. For me, I had a lot of anxiety around writing my dissertation, and that caused me to reflect a lot. Like, what am I holding? What's not being said? What do I feel silenced in? And so that's kind of where we're making the connection between this embodied practice of yoga and using it as a tool for us to be able to articulate into words what it is that we're experiencing. And so it was really amazing to see the girls who participate in this yoga practice and then have discussions and have time to write. And it just all, I know, just work together because of the results that I saw from my research. So that's kind of how that integration is made. And then this is also for your listeners to know that after we did, the first 2 yoga literature and art camps, I got an outpouring of emails of people who have said, I've heard about this program. I want to know how to do it. I want to do this at my school or after school program. And that's when we said, well, we need to create trainings. We need to create workshops. And that's what we provide so that people can actually learn the kind of logistics of how this actually can work.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great to know. Yeah, I love that. I think that's pretty interesting. So I'm thinking about our culture, right? Like, and we are kind of a disembodied culture in a lot of ways. Like, we just numb our bodies, like we feed our bodies like terrible unnutritious foods, like, and we just we don't want to feel the things we're feeling. We don't want to feel the physical sensations. We sort of numb everything. And so yoga in a lot of ways is a very radical act of coming into our bodies. But I like what you're saying about connecting it to our stories.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so I think what I'm hearing you say is that as with these workshops with the teenage girls, as what I'm envisioning is that as you started to do some yoga and they start to come into their body and start to feel more of what they're feeling, then the writing was able to come more easily.
Right, absolutely. And then we also had, really skilled yoga teachers who were able to, kind of find out what we were talking about that day and making sure that the yoga class would coordinate with that. And so it was a matter of really focusing on whatever it is that we were talking about for the day. And we opened to that through our practice. And so that's where that opening started to happen. So yeah, you're absolutely right that is what kind of occurred in those moments.
Wow. That's really cool. So yeah. And so do you still work as an ethnographer, or are you kind of like full-time? Has the ethnography led to this work that you're doing now, or is it something that you sort of do as a layer on top of what you're doing?
So yes, and yes. So it's all of that. So after I finished, I was kind of met with this decision of, am I going to go into the tenure track professional kind of trajectory of being in academia, right? Or am I going to continue to work with practitioners, with teachers, with youth in the community? And I chose the latter. But from that, I have received, I think, Hunter, more opportunities to work within the academy in terms of universities and colleges to talk about this work than I probably would have been able to if I would have accepted any tenure track position. So, for example, I went to Occidental in California in 2015, and then I'm on my way to Syracuse University. And so I'm having a lot more opportunities where people are, especially with the growing, the popularity of yoga here in the West, people are really starting to get curious, especially with the growing field of yoga within academia. And so having taken that chance with my dissertation is coming up when people Google like yoga in the classrooms or yoga in higher ed. And so people are starting to reach out. And so I still have my toe in the world of academia, but full time I'm committed to working with communities and practitioners and teachers right now. I'm also doing a lot of work with the Transformative Justice and Education Center at UC Davis. My husband and I have been invited to be there and to speak on that platform where it's a lot of looking at education from a transformative perspective with regard to social justice and the justice system here in the United States. So again, a lot of opportunities that I don't know if I would have been afforded if I would have gone that other path. So I'm really grateful that I chose this way. It was a challenge initially because it was kind of that like, okay, Chelsea, what are you doing right now? Like you could go and be secure here, or you could take a chance and see what happens over here. And so we took the chance. So here we are.
Good for you. High five. That's awesome. So, I'm interested, like the teen girls, this yoga literature and art camp you do. Do you have any stories from any of the students who might have talked about how it has affected them or changed their lives at all?
Absolutely. That was a part of the case study in that first year, in that I followed all of the participants through their first school year after the program. And so I would do home visits where I would go back and interview them one-on-one and with their families as well to find out, so how did you integrate, or if you did, integrate any of the things that you learned during YLA camp into your school year. So we had girls who were either starting their freshman year of high school all the way to their final year of leaving and going into college or other other trajectories into the world. And so the feedback was that the biggest one was surprising, that they said that they were a lot more outgoing and made friends. So we did like a pre-survey to find out, why were you interested in this program to begin? And a lot of them were they just wanted to make friends. It seemed like it was really a challenge for them to be themselves, their words a lot of times. And so being able to go into these spaces and allow themselves to be unapologetically them. And I think that definitely relates to a lot of the issues that we hear with peer pressure and wanting to belong, and all of these things that are concerns of parents and families and communities. I really believe that yoga was used as a tool to allow them to have agency, not only through their school experiences, but also through their relationships. So making friends was one of the things that they said that YLA can't help them do. Also being more vocal in their classrooms. Again, I gave you the example of our co-director who saw one particular student in both settings. And a lot of the girls afterwards said that they spoke up a lot more in class and were able to share more. And so I think those were two of the biggest, findings that I had from my research, was that it really allowed them to find their voice, or if they already found their voice, to amplify it even more. So, and that was all I needed, like I went in with really no expectations, just really open to finding out what would happen. And to know that these girls are going out and being voices in their communities. One girl even said that she even spoke up against a friend who was being bullied, so just things like that, where you're starting to acknowledge, they were little social justice advocates in many ways, right? So like if they are using their yoga for that, then I'm happy,
That's awesome. That's amazing. Why do you work with girls in particular?
Sure. So our program is housed at Spelman College. That's my alma mater, and it's a historically Black college for women. We were founded, we were founded in 1881. But initially, when I shared that story with you about my friend, her name is Misty, who was murdered, I always used to talk with her about my dream about, having a yoga studio, and she was going to have a spa, and we were going to do all these things together. And so a lot of my motivation was behind the silencing that I think that she experienced right before her death. And so for me, it was a way for me to use that again as fuel to figure out, a lot of the things, especially young women of color. We are often found at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to power and privilege. And so it was important for me to provide a space, or to co-facilitate and create a space for people who were very reflective of who I was. And when I reflect on who I was at that age, I did feel very silenced and ignored in many ways, not just in my classroom, but in my community. And so I wanted to make sure that this was dedicated to that, 15-year-old Chelsea who didn't feel that anybody was listening to her. And so with that, it was almost like this moment of redemption for myself, but without being caught up too much in the self-serving of it all, also thinking of Misty and also thinking of the girls with whom I encounter every day in this world. And so that was really the inspiration between making it this single gendered space.
Oh yeah. That makes so much sense. When you have this specific experience as a woman, as an African American woman growing up, like like where they've been and what it's like. And so to provide that space for them, I imagine feels really safe. And I can't think of a lot of other spaces that are like that.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I love what you're doing with this. This is so cool.
Thank you.
I love this. So you, on kind of a lighter side, like you've been doing some interesting things. So I found like you did this. You were involved. Are you the yoga teacher for an artist named Janelle Monae, and she has like this song. Like I didn't even know about this song. I was like, oh my god, do that yoga! Wow. So anyway, there's this artist Janelle Monae. You can look it up. She has this song, "Do That Yoga." So how were you involved in that? So tell us about that.
So Janelle is a student of mine, a yoga student of mine who I've worked with. And she was really into yoga, and she, it was really cool to encounter someone who may not have had the same experience with yoga as I have, because sometimes I get very intense and very serious, especially when it comes to yoga and with my classical background. So it was really cool and refreshing to see these two Black women, myself included, me and Janelle, kind of meet at this intersection of yoga, but from two different perspectives, to see her as an artist and her take on it, and to see how she would convey, how she feels when she practices yoga. And so that was kind of how that came about. And then she later invited me to come on to the video. So don't blink, but I'm in the video. And
I gotta look.
And I also had a hand in the yoga part of it, where the dancers are actually doing a yoga sequence, and I helped choreograph that sequence with Fatima Robinson and Sean Bankhead. So that was an experience I never would have thought that I would have encountered, because I never saw yoga being in the quote unquote industry, right? I never thought that I was going to be on a video set or working with an artist who, Janelle and herself, like, I think that yoga is definitely a very fun and upbeat song, but Janelle's entire anthology of yoga is amazing, and she's doing amazing work for Black women in particular. She's in a couple of new movies that are really transgressing the narrative of society. Moonlight, that just came out, and then in January, Hidden Figures, about the three mathematicians who are African women, right?
Yeah, we saw the preview for that.
Right?
Sorry.
So, yeah, that's it. That's her. And so it was really powerful to work with someone who has been such a pioneer within our community, and then to also see her fun side. And it also kind of pulled me out of my tightness as well. So I'm really grateful for that opportunity. And I love Janelle. We're still in contact with each other. And so, yes, that's my relationship with Janelle Monae.
That's so cool. I'm sorry, I totally talked over you because I got so excited about that movie. But tell me the two. What's the name of the movie about the mathematician? Because we saw the preview for that with my family, with my two girls. My little girl, who's 9, is like kind of a smarty pants, and she just like loves being a smart kid, and she like loves doing algebra, learning algebra and reading a bazillion books. And then we saw this preview and she was like, oh my god, that's awesome. Like, so we're planning on going to see it. We're so psyched. So tell me the name of it again.
Yeah, it's called Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures.
And it comes out in January.
Oh yeah, we should, listener, go see it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be taking my daughter. My youngest, my 6-year-old, was like, I don't know, it kind of looks boring, but my 9-year-old was like really psyched.
I guarantee with Taraji, Octavia, and Janelle, it will not be boring. That is a powerhouse of personalities there.
Wow. I'm so excited.
So tell
That's
her
cool.
It'll be good.
Okay, all right. Well, she's 6, so she likes animated movies and things like that. It's a whole different ball game, but oh wow, that's awesome. So yeah, this is like another vote in the universe for you, stepping away from academia and following your dharma, right? Following your calling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you also did another kind of cool event. You taught yoga at the White House. Tell us about that.
I did.
So cool.
That was amazing. Probably one of the top 5 moments in life. So I was invited along with, I believe 19. I think there were 20 of us in total, other yoga influencers across the country to come and teach yoga in the yoga garden. And during the Obama administration, our First Lady, Michelle, was very adamant about having her Let's Move campaign integrated into the Easter egg roll. And so she had different sections really of like, I believe they had like Soul Cycle. They had, she ran with a group of children around the entire White House lawn. And so yoga was one of the biggest turnouts that we had. And so all of these yoga influencers had an opportunity to step on the stage and lead the yard in yoga. So I was so privileged to be able to start my session immediately after President Obama addressed the entire Easter egg roll. So it was just like he was finished and they're like, Chelsea, you're on. I was just like, what? So they mic'd me up. And it was really cool. And the yoga influencers are all the way from one of our veterans who is a double amputee who still practices yoga, Dan Nevins, to BB McGill, who was the lead guitarist for Beyonce's, all female, it's escaping me, musicians, her band.
Oh, wait. So, are you talking about like way back when from like I'm a Survivor? I'm a Survivor.
No, no. Maybe about her second to last album when she toured with the all band. Yes. And so we all came from these different, fields, but all of us had a tremendous impact in our community. And so I was recognized for the work that I do with girls through yoga, literature, and art camp. And so that was a phenomenal experience. I will never, ever forget it. Met some amazing people who I had no idea were doing the work that they're doing. So that was really cool. So we were there this past March during the Easter holiday.
Wow. I can't even imagine. That must have been so fulfilling. Like, it almost like, you've had all your training and meditation and everything, but to like lean into that kind of like excitement must have been almost, too much. I can't even imagine.
We still get emails and calls about that. And my actual local newspaper, the Dayton Daily News, just featured me specifically about that. And here we are almost a year later. So it was definitely a moment that my hometown, my family, they were very proud of. And so was I.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's awesome. Good for you, Chelsea. I'm so psyched.
Thank you.
So I love what you're doing. I want to encourage everyone to check out Chelsea. I'm going to, we'll ask you where they can find you, but your blog, Chelsea Loves Yoga, Chelsea Writes, and she has these trainings now, I'm hearing, for if you want to have a yoga, art, and literature camp. So tell us where people can find you.
Sure. So I live on chelsealovesyoga.com, and that's CHELSEA, Loves Yoga. And then our nonprofit is actually redclayyoga.org. And I also have some available workshops through Yoga International, emphasizing the work that we do with yoga, literature, and art camp. So it's a digital opportunity for people to learn with me. And we have some exciting things coming up on the horizon as well. So if you just subscribe to the Chelsea Loves Yoga newsletter, you'll get that into your inbox immediately. So so those are some of the places. And then of course, like Instagram and Facebook is pretty consistent across the board. Chelsea Loves Yoga.
All right. Awesome. It has been a real joy and a real pleasure to talk to you. I love the work that you're doing in the world. And I'm just so thrilled that I can share it with my audience, and it's been a blast. Thank you.
Thank you, Hunter. And thank you for taking the time and interest in learning about what we do here.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun. Don't you just love Chelsea Jackson? I loved talking to her. The work she's doing is so cool. Gosh, I just love it. If you have any questions about the podcast, you can always email me at hunter@hunteryoga.com. The notes for this episode will be at yogastoriesproject.com. I want to thank our sponsor, Choose to Be Nice. Go over and grab yourself some awesome apparel that just says Choose to Be Nice. Like, why not? Why have a have a hat that says Choose to Be Nice? Like, let's send that message. And use the coupon code HUNTER20 for 20% off. I am still doing a few last minute clarity calls, complimentary calls for my coaching. You can start the year of transformation. Very exciting. You can go over to hunteryoga.com, look under work with me, and see how we can get together and talk. That would be really nice. And thank you to William Fields for the music. He's doing his first art opening this Friday coming up. I'm so excited for him. So everyone do a little yay snaps for Bill. And thank you so much for listening. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad I get to share this time with you, and I hope this inspires you, and I can't wait to see you more in the new year. Let's make 2017 amazing. This is our time. Seriously, let's do it. I'm wishing you a beautiful, beautiful week whenever you're listening to this. I'm wishing you a beautiful, beautiful day and sending lots of love your way. Namaste.